Caitlin Clark has officially stepped into the center of one of the wildest WNBA free agency waves we have ever seen. And what just happened in Indiana is already changing how people view this entire roster. In just 48 hours, the Fever didn't just make moves, they started building something that looks very intentional, very calculated, and maybe even dangerous for the rest of the league. From supermax extensions to unexpected returns and perfectly timed signings, everything feels connected. And now the real question everyone is asking is simple. Is Indiana quietly becoming the most complete team in the WNBA right in front of our eyes? Because once you break down what happened in that first wave of moves, it stops looking random and starts looking like a full blueprint. It started with Kelsey Mitchell, and this was not just a signing, this was a statement. Indiana didn't just bring her back, they locked her in on a supermax deal, sending a clear message that the franchise is not rebuilding anymore. It is trying to win right now. Mitchell is coming off a season where she was not only an all-star, but also one of the most efficient high-volume scorers in the entire league, and Indiana made sure she was not going anywhere. Then came Monique Billings, and this move hit differently if you understand how Caitlin Clark plays. Billings is not a flashy name, but she is exactly the type of forward who turns a fast-paced system into a problem for every defense in the league. She runs the floor, finishes at the rim, and does not slow anything down, which is exactly what Indiana wants. And just when people thought the first day was done, Lexi Hull was back in the mix, not through a traditional announcement, but through a viral social media moment that instantly took over fan discussions. That alone told you something about how this team operates now. Everything is connected to energy, chemistry, and timing. Then there is Tashia Harris stepping into the backup guard role, a move that might not look huge on paper, but in reality, it is about stability. Someone who can keep the offense flowing when Caitlin Clark sits, without changing the identity of the team. And while all of this was happening, the biggest name still had not officially dropped, Sophie Cunningham. The silence around her situation was not confusion, it was anticipation, and the longer it stretched, the more it felt like something big was already locked in behind the scenes. But to really understand what Indiana is building, you have to go deeper than just names on a roster, because the real story starts with loyalty and what players chose to sacrifice to be part of this moment. Kelsey Mitchell is the perfect example. Before any Supermax deal, before any headlines, she lived through seasons that most stars would have walked away from. There were years where Indiana won just a handful of games, seasons where the future looked completely uncertain, and still, she stayed. She kept scoring, kept showing up, and kept carrying a franchise that was struggling to find its identity. And then everything changed. In 2025, Mitchell didn't just have a good season, she had a career-defining one. First team All-WNBA, top 5 in MVP voting, and one of the most dangerous perimeter scorers in the entire league. This wasn't development anymore, this was arrival. So when Indiana gave her that Supermax deal, it wasn't just about talent. It was about timing, trust, and everything she had already endured for that franchise. Because players like Mitchell don't just get rewarded for what they do in one season, they get rewarded for what they survive to get there. And that same emotional layer runs through this entire roster. This is not a group that was built overnight or assembled by accident. It is a collection of players who have either stayed through the worst years or chosen Indiana because they believe the best years are finally here. That is what makes this different. Not just skill, not just stats, but history, sacrifice, and belief finally aligning at the same time. And this is where things start to get even more interesting, because Indiana isn't just signing talent, they are stacking chemistry that already exists. Take Monique Billings, for example. This isn't a player coming into a completely unknown situation. She has already shared the floor with Caitlin Clark in international competition, and the result was immediate. Easy buckets, perfect timing, and a clear understanding of where the ball is going before it even gets there. That kind of connection is not something you teach in training camp. It is something that already exists in real game moments. And it does not stop there. Billings has also shared space with key Indiana pieces in competitive environments. which means she is not walking into a locker room full of strangers trying to figure things out from scratch. She is stepping into a system where familiarity already gives Indiana a head start. Because in a league where margins are thin, chemistry is not a bonus, it is an advantage. And right now, Indiana looks like a team that is not just assembling players, but reconnecting pieces that already fit together naturally. And then the story stops being just about basketball and starts becoming something the internet cannot ignore. Because Indiana's free agency run is not only happening on the court, it is unfolding in real time on social media, where every post, every comment, and every small interaction suddenly feels like a clue. It starts with a simple moment: Caitlin Clark and Lexi Hull together at Augusta, not in a press conference, not in a game setting, but casually filming a TikTok that instantly spreads everywhere. A light moment, almost harmless on the surface, but fans immediately lock in. Because in today's league, nothing is ever just content. Everything is communication. Then comes the Cunningham situation, and this is where the internet really starts working overtime. A tag in the comments, a playful exchange, a few lines that feel casual but land like signals. Suddenly, fans are not just watching free agency, they are decoding it. And that is when speculation takes over. Posts get analyzed frame by frame, captions get reinterpreted, timing gets questioned. Sophie Cunningham's social media presence turns into a storyline of its own, and the longer there is no official announcement, the louder the narrative becomes. Because this is what modern sports looks like now. It is not just contracts and press releases anymore. It is hints, reactions, and digital breadcrumbs that fans piece together before anything is officially confirmed. And Indiana, intentionally or not, is at the center of all of it. But here is where the entire situation shifts from exciting to genuinely tense. Because not every move Indiana is considering is simple, and not every decision is just about adding names. Behind the scenes, the Cunningham situation becomes the biggest talking point, not because the deal is unclear, but because of the timing. Everything suggests the agreement is already there. The numbers are aligned, the intention is mutual, but the announcement is delayed. And in a league where every hour gets analyzed, silence starts creating its own storyline. At the same time, Indiana is looking at bigger decisions that could have changed everything about the roster construction. Players like Brianna Jones, Azura Stevens, and other high-value frontcourt options enter the conversation. And suddenly the front office is not just thinking about who to add, but what kind of identity they actually want to commit to. Do you spend big on size and experience? Or do you stay loyal to speed, spacing, and transition basketball built around Caitlin Clark? Because every option comes with a cost. One direction gives you immediate physical dominance. The other keeps your system intact. And while fans see signings and rumors, what Indiana is actually doing is sitting in that tension, trying to decide what kind of contender they want to be. And that is why the Cunningham delay hits harder than it should, because it represents more than just one player. It represents a roster still being shaped in real time, with every decision affecting the next. And once you step back from the drama, the rumors, and the social media noise, what Indiana is actually building starts to look extremely specific, almost intentional in every layer. Because this is no longer just about adding talent. It is about building a system that maximizes Caitlin Clark's strengths. A system where pace is not optional. It is the identity. Where transition is not a phase of offense. It is the foundation of everything they do. That is why every guard move matters. Kelsey Mitchell gives them elite scoring gravity on the perimeter. Lexi Hull brings defensive toughness and spacing. Sophie Cunningham adds physicality and shot creation in key moments. And Tashia Harris becomes the stabilizer, the one who keeps everything functional when the tempo does not slow down. In that structure, Clark does not have to force anything. She does not need to carry every possession the same way she did in her rookie environment, because now she has players who can finish, space, and punish defenses immediately after her reads. And defensively, Indiana is no longer just trying to survive possessions. They're trying to disrupt them. The combination of length, effort, and switching ability gives them flexibility that was missing before. So when people look at this roster and see individual signings, the front office sees something else entirely. They see roles already assigned, minutes already accounted for, and a system that is starting to run itself. But even with all of that in place, there's still one part of this roster that decides how far Indiana can actually go, and that is the front court. Because Caitlin Clark can create offense, Kelsey Mitchell can score at an elite level, and the wings can defend and space the floor, but none of that matters in a playoff series if the paint is not controlled. That is why Aaliyah Boston becomes the anchor of everything Indiana is building. She is the interior presence, the rebounding force, and the defensive stabilizer who holds the system together when games slow down and physicality increases. But the reality is, Boston cannot carry that responsibility alone every night. Foul trouble, fatigue, and matchup pressure all create gaps. And those gaps are exactly what separate good teams from championship teams. That is where the front office focus shifts to names like Brianna Turner, Rebecca Allen, and other high-impact role players who do not need the ball to change the game. Players who can defend, finish, switch, or stretch the floor depending on the matchup. Because the key question is not just who fits Indiana, it is what version of Indiana they want to become. Do they want more rim protection or more spacing, more size or more mobility? And every remaining signing is now being measured against one thing only. Does it support the way Caitlin Clark plays, or does it force the system to change? And when you put it all together, this is no longer just a free agency recap. It starts to look like a full-scale blueprint for a championship run. Because Indiana has quietly built something most teams struggle to find: balance. A backcourt that can score and create at an elite level, wings that bring defense and toughness, and a front court that is being carefully shaped around fit instead of reputation. Imagine it in real time. Caitlin Clark pushing the pace and creating advantages before defenses are set. Kelsey Mitchell punishing every mistake from deep. Monique Billings sprinting the floor and finishing in transition before the defense can recover. And Aaliyah Boston controlling the paint while everything else flows around her. That is not just talent. That is structure. And structure is what wins in the playoffs when games slow down and every possession matters. What makes this even more dangerous is that Indiana did not rush it. They did not blow their cap space on mismatched stars or chase names that did not fit the system. They waited, they evaluated, and they chose players who already understand their roles before training camp even begins. And that is why the rest of the league is paying attention right now. Because if this clicks the way it looks on paper, Indiana is not just trying to compete in 2026, they're trying to take over it. So the real question is simple. After everything Indiana just did in free agency, are we watching the rise of a contender or the beginning of something much bigger? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next update.